In the news tonight, Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki vows to defeat the rebels as a U.S. aircraft carrier transits the Gulf, and Iran says it could cooperate with the U.S. to boost security in the country. Pro-Russian separatists shoot down an army transport plane in East Ukraine, killing 49 servicemen on board. And polls close in Afghanistan after a mostly peaceful runoff, after millions turn out for a second time to elect a successor to President Hamid Karzai. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. Sirens wailed in southern Israel following a strike by Israeli forces in the Gaza Strip earlier in the day. The Israeli Air Force carried out a number of airstrikes in the Gaza Strip after 2 rockets were launched into Israeli territory. The rockets landed in an open area but caused no harm. The Israeli army said in a statement the Air Force hit a suspected terrorist base in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. Gazan authorities confirmed the air raids and said 2 rockets were fired on an area in Tel Sultan in Rafah and also did not cause any harm. A Gaza Interior Ministry spokesman said an Israeli Apache carried out the air raid with rockets that hit a training camp for Al-Qassam brigades in Khan Yunis. He said the site was damaged, but there were no casualties. Meanwhile, Israel reinforced its troops in the occupied West Bank to step up searches for 3 Israeli teenagers believed to have been abducted. The teenagers disappeared 2 days ago as they tried to hitch a ride from a Jewish settlement nearby the city of Hebron. Israeli soldiers arrested at least 12 Hebron area residents, including 2 women. An Israeli military source said Israel is working on the assumption that the 3 teenagers were abducted by Palestinians. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in a statement that he held President Mahmoud Abbas's administration responsible for the fate of the missing 3. Earlier, a statement posted on Arabic social media said a Palestinian wing of the Iraq and Syria-based Islamist militant group ISIL had seized the Israelis. The statement, however, did not appear on regular ISIL websites, raising doubts of its authenticity. Over to Syria, where at least 30 people were killed when a car bomb exploded in a market in eastern Syria near the border with Iraq. Scores were seriously injured in the blast. The British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the blast occurred in the town of Al Mayadeen, which lies on the Euphrates River in the Deir ez-Zor province. The area is a power base for the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, and Al-Qaeda splinter group active in Syria and Iraq that seized several major towns in northern Iraq this week and swept south towards Baghdad. ISIL has been battling the Nusra Front and other insurgents in the Deir ez-Zor province for months for control of oil fields and strategic sites. Hundreds were killed and thousands had to flee their homes. Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki told army officers that volunteers would arrive to help defeat the Islamist militants. During a visit to Samarra, Maliki addressed military officers and vowed to defeat the rebels. An Iraqi military official earlier announced the armed forces have regained the initiative and will not stop at liberating Mosul from ISIL terrorists, but all other parts.
Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki was defiant, warning Sunni insurgents on Saturday not to underestimate his forces.
With all seriousness, and by the name of God, if our heads are turned into bombs or our bodies turned into courses for tanks and vehicles to move on, we will not stop fighting them. So, let them not be deluded. This is the beginning of the end of them.
The defiant tone was in stark contrast to reports Iraqi soldiers retreated as the group, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, made lightning advances on Mosul and Tikrit. Maliki says there was a conspiracy or plot to create confusion within the military that led to some soldiers leaving their positions. Acknowledging numerous setbacks this week, he issued a warning to the soldiers.
Those who abandon their positions should not imagine that they can take refuge in their homes or with their mothers. If they do not join their units or any unit near their units, and if they don't do that quickly, they will be considered deserters, and they will be liable for harsh punishment, which might be tantamount to execution.
His message came as thousands of men in Karbala answered a Shiite cleric's call to arms. These men say they're ready to join the fight against Sunni militants, who gained so much ground so quickly during the week that Washington began considering airstrikes to halt their advance on Baghdad.
Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel ordered an aircraft carrier moved into the Gulf. Hagel said the carrier should be ready in case Washington decides to pursue a military option in Iraq. The USS George H.W. Bush is a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, the largest warships in the world. The ships expected to transit the Gulf late today are powered by 2 nuclear reactors and can carry a crew of about 6,000 people. The Pentagon said in a statement the order will provide the Commander-in-Chief additional flexibility in the event military options will be required to protect American lives, citizens, and interests in Iraq. Yesterday, U.S. President Barack Obama said he was still weighing options on how the U.S. would help Iraq deal with the insurgency, and according to the Pentagon, airstrikes could be one of the options. And Iran's President Hassan Rouhani said Tehran could contemplate cooperation with the United States to restore security to Iraq if Washington was forced to confront terrorist groups in Iraq and elsewhere. Rouhani said Tehran is unlikely to send forces to Iraq, but stands ready to provide help within the framework of international law, adding that Baghdad has not requested such assistance. We all should practically and verbally confront terrorist groups, Rouhani told a news conference broadcast live on state television. Iranian officials earlier said that for now, Tehran will send advisors and weaponry to boost security in Baghdad. On the ground in Iraq, the offensive by the ISIL on towns and cities is reported to have slowed down today after days of fighting, as government forces said they are gaining territory in counterattacks. Video uploaded to social media purports to show heavily armed fighters from the ISIL driving through the Iraqi towns of Mosul and Baji. The town of Baji is home to Iraq's biggest oil refinery and is a major provider of power to Baghdad. Since Tuesday, black-clad ISIL fighters have seized Mosul and Tikrit and other towns and cities north of Baghdad, forcing the army to abandon bases and weapons. Hundreds of Egyptians gathered in front of the Cairo Opera House demanding an end to sexual harassment. Demonstrators, mainly women, held banners that read "A time for rape to stop" and "Death to the sexual harasser." The rally had secured authorization from the Interior Ministry, and police were deployed at the edges of the protest to protect it. The demonstration was called for after a graphic video showing a naked and bruised woman surrounded by a mob of men went viral this week. According to an Ahram online reporter at the scene, a taxi driver was taken away by police after a protester reported that he had verbally harassed her. Organizers and women activists said they want to raise awareness about sexual harassment and rape and the need for amendments to the sexual harassment law.
Basically, sexual harassment is a daily reality for all women in Egypt. It's a problem that we have to face on a daily basis, and it's really frustrating the fact that honestly people or men, these kind of like harassers, get away with no kind of punishment from the government, and everything's totally fine. So today we came here because it's the moment to end this, or to ask for the government to implement a penal code to really for harassment to be ended.
Pro-Russian separatists shot down an army transport plane in East Ukraine, killing 49 servicemen. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko summoned his security chiefs for consultations and promised an adequate response after the plane was hit by an anti-aircraft missile as it was about to land at Luhansk airport near the border with Russia. Charred debris was scattered for hundreds of meters over the sloping wheat field where the plane came down overnight. And in Kiev, protesters pelted the Russian embassy with eggs and ripped up a Russian flag in protest at what they called Moscow's backing of separatist rebels in East Ukraine. The protest followed the deaths of the Ukrainian servicemen on board the shot-down military plane. Millions of Afghans turned out for a second time to elect a successor to President Hamid Karzai. Polls closed in Afghanistan after a mostly peaceful runoff. The election pitted former anti-Taliban fighter Abdullah against ex-World Bank economist Ashraf Ghani after neither secured the 50% majority needed to win outright in the first round on April 5th. Here's more.
Abdullah votes in Afghanistan's second round of presidential elections in which he's a contender.
My message to the people of Afghanistan is that today is your day, today is our day, today is Afghanistan's day, and better future is awaiting for them, and better prosperous life is awaiting for them, peaceful life is awaiting from them.
His rival Ashraf Ghani is the only competition in this two-horse race for a job few would envy.
This time it's a clear choice between two leaders with different visions, different experience, two teams committed to different ideals.
One of them will take over from outgoing President Hamid Karzai. The winner will inherit an unfinished war and an economy in the doldrums. The Taliban are still strong, and Afghanistan's foreign-trained army has never put to rest questions about its effectiveness. Some voters were optimistic about the outcome.
We came here to vote for the future of Afghanistan and the future of my children. I'm glad that I have the chance to cast my vote and choose my leader. We have decided to put the past behind us. We are looking for a better future.
From windswept deserts on the Iranian border to the remote, rugged Hindu Kush mountains, 12 million people were eligible to take part in Saturday's poll. A high turnout of nearly 60% in the first round was a major defeat for the Taliban. Observers expect fewer than 5 million this time, partly because of security concerns.
Britain's royals went out in force on the Buckingham Palace balcony to celebrate Queen Elizabeth's 88th birthday. The Queen's official birthday is on April 21st, which is usually celebrated in private. But traditionally, the monarch marks her birthday publicly in June because the weather is usually better for open-air celebrations. The Queen and senior royals watched the Trooping the Colours ceremony, an annual display of pomp and pageantry that marks the official birthday of the Queen. Thousands of spectators gathered to watch the traditional parade, which involves more than 1,000 soldiers and horses. A huge victory for the Netherlands and the worst ever start for Spain in the World Cup opener in Group B. The Netherlands were nothing but brutal. 2 stunning goals from Dutch captain Robin van Persie, 2 from Arjen Robben and 1 from Stefan de Vrij. That is a total of 5 goals. Though Spain took the lead in the 27th minute through a Xabi Alonso penalty, Van Persie equalized brilliantly in the 44th minute, and the rest is history. Only once before had Spain conceded 5 times in a World Cup game in a 6-1 loss to hosts Brazil in 1950. And Chile got the victory they needed if they are to have any chance of progressing from a daunting Group B after beating Australia 3-1. Alexis Sanchez put Chile ahead from close range after 12 minutes, and 2 minutes later Jorge Valdivia made it 2. In the second half, Jon Besjour grabbed a third for Chile. Australia's sole goal came from Tim Cahill. England plays Italy in a couple of hours in a Group D clash. An Englishman with a dream left a safe job in England to live a once-in-a-lifetime adventure and travel 8,000 kilometers to visit all the venues where England are set to play during the World Cup. Andy Smith, a die-hard England fan, has traveled for 5 months to fulfill his dream of being in Brazil after obtaining tickets for his team's 3 group games. Since quitting his job last September, he's attended intensive spinning classes to physically prepare for the trip. And finally, fair weather continues tonight in most regions with northwesterly moderate winds. Tomorrow, moderate weather is in the forecast for much of the country. Winds will be northwesterly moderate, picking up in the afternoon. The Gulf of Aqaba, it will be hot tomorrow with northerly moderate to brisk winds and slightly choppy seas. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki vows to defeat the rebels as a U.S. aircraft carrier transits the Gulf, and Iran says it could cooperate with the U.S. to boost security in the country. Pro-Russian separatists shoot down an army transport plane in East Ukraine, killing 49 servicemen on board. And polls close in Afghanistan after a mostly peaceful runoff, after millions turn out for a second time to elect a successor to President Hamid Karzai. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Alia Tuqan. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night and see you tomorrow.